Hello everyone, welcome to night 14 of the Orphan's Tales Live Quarantine Reading Series, Book 2. I actually stopped doing the math to what night we're on. I think it took us 44 to get through the first book, doing every night, and now we're at 14, so that will make night 58 of this entire. We absolutely didn't think we'd get here, I don't, when we started this. I really thought, we'd be lucky to finish the first book, or unlucky. But here we are, starting this book 2 of book 2, and heading into the end here. So the book 2 is about the same length as book 1, so it's about, let me look here. Yeah, it's about 211 pages long, 215. So I assume it'll take us 13 nights again. Wow. I apologize tonight if the cat knocks over the camera. He's already done it once. So I can't promise that he won't do it again. He's sitting here very resentfully and bigly, angry that he's not on my lap. You can't say no to a 25-pound cat. It's just impossible. So yeah, good to see everyone. It's not as hot today, so I'm here back in my back with my bangs down and my regular shirt. Some of you saw the impromptu Sebastian session the other day, where we were playing around in here, and he was messing around with the camera, so we put it on, and he put these glasses on and completely failed to read the Orphan's Tales. I don't know what's wrong with that kid. But here we are, back at our usual time and place. It's good to see everyone. I found a lipstick. I found a lipstick in a drawer. So this is Frost from MAC, which I have not worn before. So new book, new lipstick. Worn before on the thing. I think that we really are probably out of I think I maybe have 1 or 2 lipsticks left that I haven't used. So we'll see if we can cycle through them. Minus like my 80s costume ones, which I don't think anyone needs to see. I'm just babbling, so let's get started. I'll do my intro nonsense, which you all must have memorized by this point, which I barely have memorized, but I at least know that I've been lightly mocked by family members for saying the same thing over and over again on stream. Anyway, for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a play, a one-woman show. You can find music based on these books, and we would be listening to it tonight, but I'm having some kind of weird internet problems. We had a power outage today, so I can't seem to access Spotify. I don't know what's going on. But you can find music based on these books on Spotify and at sjtucker.com. You can buy copies of them at your local independent bookseller's web portal. Mine, if you want to patronize them, is printbookstore.com. You can find me on Twitter at Valente. You can also subscribe to my Patreon at Valente, which will have a lot of updates next week, because I'm so close, you guys. I'm so close to finishing this book. It's been hanging over my head for so many months. So next week will be lots of Patreon goodies. You can ask me questions when the stream is over. It's better to think of them while I'm reading so that you can put them up as soon as I finish, and nobody has to have dead air while I stare awkwardly into the camera. And you can catch up in the archive at Cat Valente Live. Told you I didn't have this memorized. At Cat Valente Live on YouTube. They tend to go up a day or 2 after this, and you can watch them anytime. And if you would like to support this and all of the other work that I do, that would be amazing. I have a tip jar on my Instagram profile, on my YouTube profile, and on my website, which is catherinevalente.com. This is, I know everyone thinks it's over, but it isn't, and things aren't really any better for freelancers than it was when I started saying this in March. So anything that you can contribute to keeping all of these fake flickering lights on would be greatly appreciated, and I will thank you by name on the next stream, if anyone does. Yeah, so let's get started. Now, here's the thing. I have no memory of how this starts, but I do remember more of this book than any of the other books in the Orphan Tales, probably because I technically wrote it most recently, even though most recently still means 15 years ago. So I know that some good stuff is coming. I know our little robot friend, our little steampunk Terminator on the front there is coming. It's one of my favorite bits. But I don't really remember how this starts, so I want to tell you that things are going to be more cheerful. They are, 100%. Are they going to start more cheerful? I can't say, because I don't remember. But let's hope, let's cross our fingers together. As I've explained a number of times, these books were based on the 4 elements because I thought that was deep when I was in my early 20s. So this is the Book of Fire. It is everything coming all together, and it's definitely going to be more cheerful than Marrow, because there's nothing in here that is less cheerful that is less cheerful than Marrow is, or more cheerful. I don't know. Marrow sucks, and it's not going to get that bad again. There are mice. I do know the mice are coming, and the spider is coming too. There are a lot of vermin in this. Sorry, but yeah, there's definitely there's definitely creepy stuff happening. But on the whole, it is a more up with people. Not human people, but like people in the global sense than the previous one. I'm sorry about that, guys. But here we go. All right, Book of the Skald. Let's hope it starts with something cheerful. Probably doesn't. You need somewhere to go, so it probably doesn't. But I genuinely don't even remember what the first part of this is. I remember the garden bit, but I don't remember what the big frame tale is. So let's find out together. I'm 41 now. I was 26, 25 when I started writing this. 25. So, boy, apologies for anything that doesn't hold up. As I've said with other things, we'll talk about it if it doesn't. If you're not a little cringy about things you wrote when you were 25, by the time you're in your 40s, you're doing something wrong. So let's hope that we're doing well. It is the Book of Fire, but we are going to start in the winter, so I'm not sure what I was thinking there, but I probably thought it was edgy. Let's get started with the Book of the Skald. In the garden. It was snowing in the garden. This was not unheard of. Surely in the books of the Sultan there was a woodcut of ladies in fur collars cavorting in the snow, little bell-strung dogs leaping at their feet. Some few flakes had even fallen when the girl was young, but certainly not this. Not a blizzard which sunk men into ice to their knees. Frost had not gilded the leaves of the lemon trees in so long that even the oldest of noble women doddering in her bed, could only dimly recall what color her dog might have been and the sound of the jangling bells. Yet the lake had frozen into a reed-rimmed mirror, and the pine needles were sheathed in ice, glittering cold and quiet. Children cavorted, dogs leapt, new woodcuts were hurriedly pressed. The chestnut boughs were frozen in place, and the wedding was set for the longest night of the year, so that the feast could last as long as possible. Beasts from far-off places were brought to the palace to be roasted, and the boy sniffed at plates of rhinoceros, crocodile, camel, bear, and hippopotamus. He wondered glumly what would be served at his wedding. He was tired of being clucked over by seamstresses who seemed only to discuss how much he had grown, how broad his chest would be in a few years. Needles glittered in their mouths like ice. In all the delight of the snow, the garden was blazing with candles and colors, as the palace yearned to touch and taste the stuff for themselves. The kitchen maids stuck out their tongues to catch flakes. The young men brought frozen oranges to their lovers. Skirts of violet and emerald swished over the paths. Shoes of clattering horn and oiled stag skins spoiled the perfect white with footprints, like ink scrawled haphazardly upon a page of new paper. Among all of these, the boy sometimes thought he saw the girl, but there were so many black-haired girls in the palace, and each time he rounded a hedge or a clay bowl of winter lilies or a bare plum tree, following a stream of dark curls, there was only a pretty rouged child with jewels on her forehead. He could not even bring himself to apologize. But he was sure she would come again. He knew it. The flat sky filled with drifting snow, and it melted on his scalp, but he felt no cold. She was there in the garden somewhere, so he was happy enough, sure that just around the next drift she was waiting for him. When she disappeared before, he was sure she had abandoned him, but now, had he not heard the tale of Seven and Oubliette? Did he not know himself as true a friend as the one-armed boy? Did he not know her as wild and lovely as the Huldra? His faith only faltered a little, like a larch bending in a stiff wind as the winter wore on, and the snow did not melt, and she did not appear. He chased drifts of black hair like rabbits, and the night of the wedding drew nearer, and still she did not appear. Dogs leapt, bells jangled. Finally, the night before the wedding bloomed lightless, moonless, starless. The only lights in the garden were high braziers and candles, their flames reflecting blue and white on the sparkling, freezing ground. The boy walked through the chestnut chapel, where everything from altars to aisle was draped in cloth to keep it safe from the frost. And so it seemed that the deepest snow of all lay on Dinarzad's dais. As he passed it, he thought he heard the chime of a little bird, and his heart leaping, he dashed into the snow to follow it, through bloomless rose bushes and the black husks of pomegranates, through blazing icy persimmons and knobbled acacias, all the way through the center of the garden, to the center of the garden and through it, to the far edge, farther than he had ever run before, to the great silver gate which ran all around the palace grounds like a river. The bird chime led him on, and the boy's breath was quick and fast, his brow wet by the time he reached the filigree gate, which showed an endless scene that circled the garden and back again on itself, a scene of a great battle between men and monsters, in which the men had stern eyes of silver and pearl, and the beasts had craven expressions wrought in iron. Braziers capped the gate every so often, and the wood beyond was dark and deep. On the monster's side stood the girl in her red cloak. In that moment, the boy loved his sister for slipping that outlandish thing into his pack. The girl's lips were pale and her eyebrows white with snow, her long hair strung with flakes like pearls. She held the little jeweled bird with its long blue and gold tail in her hands and did not smile or raise her eyes. He could not be sure if she was crying, but her breath was warm and misted on the air. "I do not know any more stories," she whispered. "What? You swore to tell me more." There are no more that I can tell." "Oh, but if the tales are over—" "I did not say they were over. I said I did not know any more." The girl picked at the pearly beak of her bird. "I do not understand." The girl looked up, and the rims of her eyes were red beneath the sweet, inky black of her lids. "I told you long ago that I read the tales of my eyes in cast-off mirrors or in pools and fountains. I told you that it was difficult, that I could only read one eye at a time, and that I read them backward, slowly, as such tasks will go. I told you stories from the creases of my left eyelid and my right. I told you all the stories that I could read in those mirrors and fountains and pools. I have told them all. All that remains now are the tales which begin on one eye and end on another, which cross creases and lashes and twist over each other. And these tales I do not know. I cannot tell. I cannot close my eyes and yet still read them in the water or the glass. They are hidden from me." The boy opened his mouth and closed it again. "But I want to hear more," he cried. The girl smiled, a long, slow smile he had never seen before. "Will you tell me a story, my prince? Will you read from my closed eyes and let me rest my throat? Will you read from my... let me hear the last things which are written upon me?" "Oh, but I can't do it. I can't tell them the way you can. I'm not like you. I don't know how to tell a tale. I don't know how to speak all those voices." "It's all there already. Please, I want to hear them. I want to know what is waiting on my skin, waiting to be told, waiting to be heard. I've told you so many things. Tell me a story if you are my friend." The boy blushed furiously. By the firelight, he laid out his own cloak on the stiff, ice-scrimmed snow and gave the girl a tiny vial of orange wine and a slice of hippopotamus, which they agreed was not entirely pleasant and tasted something like chewed mud and river water with a honey glaze. Finally, the boy leaned forward until their noses were almost touching. He could see, as once before, the lines and letters of her eyes, and the closer he looked into the black, the more the words swam up to greet him, submerged alphabets and sigils. He became dizzy. He closed his own eyes and righted himself like a little ship tossed on a violet ocean. He looked again, and the letters were still there, floating serene. His voice was high and quavering as he began, unsure and frightened to his marrow to appear foolish before the girl. On a blasted plain, where the stars do not look, there blew hot winds like bellow gusts, and scrub sage crawled over white rock. He read slowly, as if first learning his letters. On this plain hung a great iron cage in a great iron frame, and the wind shrieked through it like a woman cut open on a slab. The tale of the waste. The moon was a mouse skull in the sky. The blue of the air was dense and deep, the color of the ocean floor, yet it blazed with heat, and golden stones quavered against the horizon. 3 long shadows were cast on the thirsty earth, whose dark cracks forked out in all directions like vines searching for the smallest trickle of water. 3 long shadows lay black and sear on that fractured desert. The iron cage threw its bars down to the dirt in disgust. There it met the curious shadow shapes of a woman and a leopard, sitting with her ears bent forward, alert and interested. The woman held her cat on a long silver leash, which swung back and forth in the wind. She was wrapped head to foot in heavy black veils that whipped and billowed behind her. Only her eyes were naked to the air, yellow as withered lemons, her irises a sickly red. The cage was filled with smoke. It blew out of wrought bars that had been bent into a cross-hatched orb hanging by a chain thicker than a man's waist from its frame. Black and acrid and stinging, it whirled and eddied and spun, caught and caustic. Within the smoke flashed 2 red-orange eyes, baleful and fringed in fiery lashes, tipped in fiery brows. The circuit of smoke snapped its tail around twice, and a body rose part way over the soot, like a mermaid peering down through her own scaly tail. Her face was full of fire, and her hair was the root of that exhalation of smoke. It blew and curled away from her dark and flaming features. The smoke came too from below her waist, for her flesh ended there very much as a mermaid's will, and nothing but blackness and red sparks striking snaked out from where her legs might have been. She was naked, humiliated, her breasts tipped in angry fire, her navel a glowering, ugly ruby. Everything that might have once been hers piled up beneath the cage like a funeral offering. The 2 women watched each other for some time, like 2 vultures on a long and lonely branch. The leopard did not stir, except for the occasional wave of her tail across the blighted ground. Finally, the leopard spoke. "Who has put you here, friend Jin?" The creature thrashed her smoke again, obscuring her blazing eyes. The moon was setting behind her, dry and transparent against the blue, as if it too had been sucked dry. "That's a nice trick," she hissed, her voice like the snapping of green branches as they first catch flame. "Doesn't the tall one talk?" The leopard yawned, her whiskers flaring, her pink tongue lolling out before the great cat remembered to put it back. "Her throat is afflicted, if you'll pardon her. Her name is Ruin, and I am Rend, and we travel together because it suits us to do so. We did not know that these parched wastes were a prison. We did not expect to find such a thing here." A tendril of smoke unspooled out of the cage toward the veiled woman in something like the shape of a slender hand, 3 of the fingers circled in flame like a rich woman's rings. "Please," cried the leopard, "do not touch her. You mustn't touch her." Ruin's tired eyes were soft and sorry, and she raised a hand out of her black robe by way of explanation. It was withered nearly to the bone, the skin as cracked and peeling as the desert, the nails blackened and split. Pieces of her skin were slowly stripping away, blowing back from her crooked fingers in the hot air. She folded her veils over the hand again and looked down in shame. The smoke recoiled, and the djinn drew it back into the hanging cage. We would share our food if you give us reason to pity you, and our water, which is more precious than amber. But you mustn't touch my lady. She is not well. The cat looked wretched, her eyes black and round, her spotted fur twitching under the predations of sand mites. The djinn considered, her eyes narrowing. She rubbed her nose with one painted hand, for the palms of her hands were stippled in glowing patterns, swirling in and on themselves, the incandescent ink tracing scarlet loops where the lines of her hands might have been, if she had any. I am Skald, she said at last, and across 6 seas and 9 deserts, I was one of the 3 queens of Kosh, and I had a crown of embers. Rend pawed the soil. And why are you caged, Skald? The djinn was quiet, her clouds dark and thoughtful. Across 6 seas and 9 deserts, I laid siege to the city of Ajana. The tale of the cage of ivory and the cage of iron. In the city of Kosh, there are 6 palaces, 6 thrones, 6 crowns. 3 queens and 3 kings there are, each in their house. I was the Ember Queen, and my coal-buttressed hall stood at the end of a long boulevard which was lined with ixora and the palaces of my sisters, the Tinder Queen and the Ash Queen. So, too, my brother's fastholds, the Hearth King, the Kindling King, and the King of Flint and Steel. When I call them my brothers and sisters, of course, I by no means wish to indicate that they were any relation to me at all. Cut this thought from your heart. Monarchs are members of a wide and varied fraternity, and this is all my connection to them. We were the inheritors of the kingdom of Kosh-Kosh, who was the first of the jinn. He spun all the rest of us out of the smoke of his beard, and the black curls flowed over the face of the earth. In the sacred fire of his heart, we were first conceived, the immaculate flame. His stare burned forests in their shade, and caused even human women, icy of heart and eye though they are, to swoon before his majesty. As his wispy children cavorted around him on the plains of the world, he exhorted them to follow him, dancing before them as he led them into glory and might. He told us that we had no need to build cities as the rest scrambled to do, but that cities would build themselves around us, for what man did not need fire? Thus he stood at the center of Shadukium in the days before it knew that name. The whole of the city swirled up around him, all those roses, all those diamonds. Jinn followed him wherever he bade, into that glittering city and out again. And still his name is holy among us, incandescent, radiant. He was beautiful. He was loved, for in his beard were wonders lesser jinn could not dream of, lamps and jewels, and scrolls of flame and cloud, which he would pluck from his body and distribute like bread. He danced on the minaret tips of our first real homes and cried poetry to the blood-riddled sunsets, cried, "Ho, for the 1,000-year holocaust of the jinn." And far below the rabble screamed their adoration. Of how many kings in those days did Kosh-Kosh grant their wishes? How many maidenheads did he burn clear through? We named this city for him, and even human virgins anoint their foreheads in ashes in mourning all these centuries hence. This is what we tell to the world with horns of brass and carnelian. So I was told, so I believed while I grew, a child in the city of Kosh, wishing for golden bells for my belt and sweet honey for my supper. Thus we have told the world for century upon century. In my own time, my smoke hair snaked and spiraled so long and so far that I had to carry it at my hips in 2 baskets of woven silver, and the other children laughed at me until their parents admonished them, for such a mark meant that I would be queen, just as the great beard of Kashkash marked him as king. I was taken away from my little house, taking with me 3 sets of golden spoons and a very nice samovar. I was initiated into the strange world of royalty. I was 10 years of age, but among my people this is a respectable middle age. We do not age, but we die out rather more quickly than other folk. We flash and spark and die. Those who are pressed by seals and trickery into lamps and such like live longer, nigh on forever, as a coal will live if not struck alight. And as a coal is not alive, so a djinn confined is not. This is the choice we make, once in the open air and burning. We never last long. Thus at 10 I was no child, but my crown was young as a weeping orphan without a breast. The Ash Queen and the Hearth King, Kohinoor and Camille, escorted me to the Alcazar of Embers, each of them carrying one of my baskets. I thought they were terrifying and beautiful, with burning gems set into their black skin and burning gold rings in their noses. Kohinoor was tall and thin as a hermit, all black smoke without a single spark in her, while Camille was smaller and fatter, lovely folds of flaming skin undulating, cradling a huge topaz in his navel. He had but one golden eye, and the flame in it danced like a dervish. The other socket was empty and burned black. In the center of the red tile floor lay a banked and glowing bowl of coals, the symbol of my office. The queen sat me down on a purple cushion. I balanced gingerly on my smoke so as not to burn the tassels. She spoke firmly and kindly as she was able, being a woman of no small position and too busy to care for an upstart new queen. They had both of them been fonder of the old queen, who had simply gone up in flames at a family dinner the previous winter, to the mild surprise of all present. "Now, young one," said Kohinoor, firmly putting me in my place, for she was nearly 15, a daunting age, "it is not appropriate that you should reign and remain ignorant of our history. Thus it is our duty to tell you how things were in the old world and how they came to be. However, we have a luncheon appointment with the Kindling King, and he is serving blackened basilisk, which is our favorite, so kindly pay attention so that we are not forced to repeat ourselves." The Tale of the First Djinn. No doubt you venerate Kashkash as your grandfather and best loved household god. Stop at this very moment. It is necessary for the glorification of the Djinn, and also so that we may not be endlessly ensorcelled into various kitchen items for the purpose of granting the wishes of fishmongers' daughters, that the name of Kashkash be adored and feared. Do not rub that lamp, darling, lest Kashkash leap out and swallow you whole. Do not clack your spoons together, sweetling. Kashkash will come billowing out of the handles and gobble you up. It is, however, not sensible to expect others to adore and fear what we do not. And so the secret history of the smoke fiends is known only to a select few, of which you are now a member. It keeps the Djinn in terror of their monarchs, and the world in terror of Djinn. Shut your mouth, dear. It does not do to attract moths. Kashkash was not the first Djinn. That poor, benighted soul has no name that any may recall, being the unwanted child of the fires that the stars conflagrated when they walked through the first lands of the world. Every scorched thing spit out a Djinn, like the pit in a cherry, and we had to find our way, even though we burned and could not cool. We are nothing but charred, forgotten children whose birth was utterly unnoticed. I am a child of the Djinn who rose up from the scalded grasses. Camille is the child of the seared winds. The queens keep their counsel and their records, though Kashkash wished all our knowledge of our origin destroyed in the fire of his own name. Now that you are one of us, we shall have to look into your pedigree. Kashkash was not the first, then, and though many might now say he was. For it is not only the common Djinn who pray to the name of Kashkash, but many preening priests and men of rank who know the truth in their boiling hearts, but take delight in telling the tale of a Djinn like Kashkash, who could have any woman destroy any man. Kashkash was indeed powerful, and fashioned his smoke into waving, fiery shapes to terrify us in our infancy, colored as no other djinn had done in blue and green and violet. To see him was extraordinary, they say, and we do not argue, at least in this. Around his head waved these airy flames, proud and strutting, proud and vain. So too is it true that he was present in the early days of the city, which would come to be called Shadukium. He dragged his flaming heel around the perimeter of that dung-spattered clearing that could hardly be called a shanty town in those days, when the long boulevard on which your Alcazar sits was nothing but a red dust run. The place which Kashkash marked out in the mud was quickly dwarfed by the endless growing roads and markets of the Rose City. We built nothing, as he instructed us, but stole and wished our first settlement into life. Kashkash told us that no one of the jinn could wish as he could, and thus wishing which he did not approve of was outlawed. The great talent of the jinn is in wishing, and of it we made a science after he passed through the world, though it has, in its turn, passed out of its keenest use since children have ceased trapping us in lamps and spoons. In those days we were young. We could not do it very well, but he did it little better. He wished for a palace of cedar and horn, and uprose the ramshackle towers of the quarter. But what he promised us. When he learned better, when he learned more, when he had enough kings as his slaves, what he would build for us then, how long he could stretch our lives. We would no longer be candles briefly lit and briefly snuffed. We would be the flame of 10,000 generations. He did learn. He did become a prodigy of wishes, but never to us were his talents bent. He loved better anything that was flesh and not smoke. The smallest of these things seemed to him more beautiful than we. We are not meant to tell outsiders that Shadukium is not in its entirety the right and province of the Smoke Whites. Let the shade of Kashkash take us with his beard flying, we do not care. The quarter Kashkash dragged out for himself became a slum, a place where fire ran in the alleys and crimson teeth flashed in the shadows. Rickety towers were built high through the rose dome until the black tips pierced the spaces between the pale pink petals, and so pressed were we in those turrets that our smoke squeezed through the very walls. Our fire shot out from floor to floor, and while Kashkash ate grapes in the governor's house and counseled him to save his coin when the scaffolders came clambering down from their work, the jinn suffered and wept in their black hovels. He danced on the crumbling tips of the towers with his fires wreathing his eyes and sparking in the stinking wind, and cried poetry to the blood-riddled sunsets, cried ho for the 1,000-year holocaust of the jinn. And far below the tenements screamed their adoration through the squalor. We lived in this way because Kashkash told us we must, and twirled his beard while he said so. He had the longest beard of any of us, after all. This is why monarchs are determined by such strange criteria. Each of the thrones demands its favorites, the hottest fire, the sweetest voice, and so on. Kashkash claimed his beard gave him serenity. Should we choose differently? He brandished his beard, and with it crushed an entire race into 6 thin towers. He told us then it was only the beginning, that we could rest soon on carnelian and brass and silk like blue fire, but day and night smeared their way across the quarter, and still we could not breathe for the smoke of one another on our faces. Finally, we could bear it no longer. The terrible smell and the unburied bodies in the decrepit buildings were close all around us. Some few remembered the open grass. What the clerics will not tell you is this: Kashkash was strangled in smoke on the steps of the tenements, and his body burned. The towers were torn brick from brick, and within a winter no charred stick of the gin quarter could be scried out among the pretty new marble and hanging tapestries. We buried him at the crux of the crossroads of a new city, as far from Shadukium and the memory of our shame as it is possible to go. And we wished for nothing, but with our own hands built up a city of carnelian and brass with couches of silk like blue fire, and paved out in beryl a long boulevard along which we raised 6 alcazars, one for each of the horrid towers that were. But guilt rode us like a bull tamer, and the jinn built statues over the place where Kashkash had been buried. They swore in his name. They made a secret of what he had done, and named the new city Kosh, hoping to avert the anger of his shade and lure some part of the beauty which had been his. To the world we say he was great, and only to ourselves do we whisper, we are glad rid of him. We have never seen the furious ghost of his long beard haunt the streets, but no one can say if this is because we keep his name spit-polished. But we wish to be safe in all things, do we not? Do you understand, little long hair? May we go now to our luncheon? And if we hear you swear by the name of that thing again, we will cut your tongue from your mouth, and that will be that. And we will pick up next week. Next week on Wednesday with the tale of the Cage of Ivory and the Cage of Iron continued. Does anyone have any questions? I remembered my drink tonight. Hi, Avi. Belated question that occurred to me as I was catching up on last time was Oubliette's name inspired by Labyrinth. I mean, maybe, probably. Labyrinth is my favorite movie, and that is a real word. It wasn't made up for Labyrinth, so probably. We'll say yes. I love noun names like that. Sebastian's probably lucky that he escaped with just a more or less regular name and a funny middle name. So I really, Oubliette's probably one of my favorite names, because it does sound like a name with the et ending. It just means forgetting, in French. But yeah, it probably did come from Labyrinth. Trapped in spoons, well, they're, lamps. If the genie's lamp is just an oil lamp, like, it's not a particularly special thing at all. So, the idea being that if you can catch it in a lamp, you can catch it in more or less anything in your kitchen. I don't think that there is actually a specific story of a genie in a spoons, but there might be. Jinns, of course, became genies when translated by white people. So we're headed straight into, now I remember that the jinns are the wraparound story. And a leopard, apparently I've been doing leopards for a long time too. Very different than Imogen from Fairyland. There's bits and pieces of the Jinn story that are from actual Jinn mythology. Obviously, the whole thing about Kosh is not. It's political allegory, which is pretty trenchant at the moment. My cat is staring at me so angrily. It's like, that is a lap, and I'm not on it, and I'm very upset. And I was thinking about him while I was reading, because little guy here actually was named Ash when he was born, and his sisters were named Ember, and what was the other one? It was Ember and Flint. So when I found out about the litter, I thought it was meant to be, since they were named after my characters. Not really. It was just a themed set. Byron, quit it. Stop it. He's about to destroy this camera. No. Hey! Stop. He's very angry at the camera. Oh, here we go. This is the anger of the kitty at not being part of the situation. I'm sorry, guys. I will adjust it here. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what his deal is. Very upset tonight. Have I seen The Witcher show yet? No, I have not. The Witcher series contains more or less every mythological creature you can think of, so that they can be killed in order. And most of them are just sort of metaphors for being a woman. I've played all the games. I haven't watched the show yet. I just haven't gotten around to it. I've been watching Elementary, which is better than I thought, but mostly I'm watching it so I can ignore it. It's nice to have on in the background. The Witcher is something I want to watch, so I haven't watched it yet. He knows I'm talking about him. The cat, my old cat named Charcoal. Was named Charcoal. He was black and white. And Byron is also black and white. The thing is, Byron is so big that he actually can't fit on my lap. So he looks at my lap resentfully because he knows he can't fit on it. He would take up the entire screen if he was here. He's so huge. He's just being mad to be mad. Also, he hates flesh. He will only sit on my lap if I'm wearing pants. Even a skirt is too much because it might slip and he might accidentally touch human skin, which is gross. I'm wearing a skirt and he's not on my lap. He's just super mad. And there's this cord hanging down from the camera. So all these things come together to mean that Byron did not approve of this reading tonight, and will be writing a letter to the manager, the Karen of Cats. Other cities in these books, which would I like to visit? I mean, Ajanab's pretty cool. At least it is by the end. Definitely not Shadukium or Romero. I mean, most of the cities are kind of evil in this, but I think probably Ajanab is the one. That at least they have a nice circus. We'll get to the circus eventually, and it's warm. Miran is, yeah, they're like I mean, like most fairy tales. So in most fairy tales, the evil place is either the forest or the city. So in this, it's mostly the city. It's always the place between cities and the place between woods that are inhabitable in fairy tale land. So Shadukian is full of terrible people, and of course it's dead now and is Marrow. And Miran is just I guess Miran is kind of like Maine when I think about it. You know, it's a cold port, a lot of bars and fish. But it's probably Ajanab. Any other questions? I'll get my outro out of the way. You guys can ask more questions while I'm yapping on. As always, for legal reasons, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This has been a play. You can find music based on these books, including based on this story I just read. It's cool to see, actually, this is my reading copy from the Orphan's Tales tour. So if you turn a couple pages back and look, the little marks are still on the page from what we used to read during the shows, so you can see what was there to be cut out to bring it down into a manageable time for SJ and I to sing. So you can find all of that wonderful music at sjtucker.com. You can buy copies of these books at any of your local independent booksellers' web portals. Mine is printbookstore.com if you want to support a main business. You can find me on Twitter at Valente. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Valente, which will have lots of updates over the next week. You can catch up in the archive at Valente Live on YouTube. And you can toss a coin to your witch if you would like to do so. There's a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is catherinevalente.com. You don't have to. This is free, but anything you can contribute would be deeply, deeply appreciated, and I will thank you by name on the next stream if you do. The city with all the towers, Alinor. Alinor would be pretty cool, but I'd have to pick. I'd have to choose a religion, which is, I'm always ambivalent. I always go both ways in pretty much everything, pun intended. So I don't know if Alinor would be for me. But yeah. No, I noticed when I first pulled the copy out of my bookshelf to read, that it had little bookmarks from the show with the various parts that had songs to go with them. So I knew that this was my reading copy early on, which is pretty, it's, you know, I know SJ's watching. Hey girl, it's all the nostalgia. This thing used to bristle with these little dinky bookmarks and pen marks and everything else. I between Orphan's Tales and Palimpsest, like I grew up enough to have proper little, you know, tabs of different colors with notations of what they were for each one. But for this, it was just a piece of legal paper ripped up, and all those years later, it's still the same little piece of legal paper ripped up and stuck in the book. So we used to tour a lot together, SJ and I, back in the days when touring was a thing, when like you were allowed to be in a room with other human beings. Seems unlikely now. But yeah, I have very fondly, every time I've come across a mark on the page that was to say, don't read this part because it's a 2-minute and 45-second reading if you cut this part out. I have smiled every time I've come across those and remembered being in impractical clothing in incredibly strange venues back when nobody really got what we were trying to do, and we couldn't always get a place that like was a bookstore or any place that really grokked it at all. But yeah, good times. I made this playlist last night for a friend of mine who is much younger, of like all the sad music we used to listen to in the early 2000s, and so I was like deep in the nostalgia last night, and so more nostalgia today of the old times when we were young. None of us had our crone hunches and canes yet. Those days, and I remember so many of those songs driving, on tours with SJ and without, all over the country, just endless roads, and listening to Decemberists and all that music. So it is of a time and a place. I'm sure, Marcus, that we will do another show together at some point when we're allowed to do shows again. SJ and I are never not in touch. So I'm sure it'll happen again. And we're doing an online one, aren't we? In October? I think we are. My brain is a little offline between finishing a book and various small crises. But I think SJ and I are doing an online thing together in October. So yeah. Yes, we will kind of do on October 1st. I thought it was October 1st. I didn't want to put it out there if I had the number wrong. So it was really lovely reading for all of you and starting this last bit. It feels bittersweet to start the sort of last jaunt. Byron's back. He's going to smack something. He's got that look in his eye. I want to destroy things. All right, come here. Come here, weirdo. You want to be on camera? You can be on camera. Here we go. There's Byron. He says hello. He says, I am the star. Put me on camera. That's my guy. Just to start this last thing, it's a little bittersweet because I really would like the quarantine to be over, but it's been lovely doing this with you guys. And there's big feels toward the end of this book, so it's all kinds of stuff. Maybe we'll come up with something else to keep reading and keep this going. We'll see. But either way, I will be back here on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. You too can be here, and I hope that you are. Yes, that was probably a third of the fluffy boy. He is a massive cat. Es un grande gato. Yes, he is. He is a venti-sized gato. And Byron will be here too, glaring balefully at me. And we will continue with our unhappy Jin then. Bye guys. Love you all. I'll see you soon.